And now onto our mental health moment. Mental health moments with Karl.
I want to see it. I want to see a different like impression or something every time. It's just gonna be some different voice each time.
I am not good at impressions, so you're not gonna get that. I'm terrible at impressions.
It'll just be like the old 2000s movies. Just in a world, we were going to have our mental health moment. All right, sorry. Go ahead, Dad.
Sorry. Speaking of mental health, Karl, what you got for us?
That's me on the poster channel. So, in our book, we quoted the American Psychological Association said, trauma is an emotional response to a terrible event, like an accident, rape, or natural disaster. Immediately after the event, shock and denial are typical. Longer-term reactions include unpredictable emotions, flashbacks, strained relationships, and even physical symptoms like headaches or nausea. Peter Levine in Waking the Tiger says, a traumatic event is defined as an event that causes a long-term dysregulation in the autonomic and core extrapyramidal nervous system. It's pretty good, wasn't it? Did I got that out? Extrapyramidal nervous system. I think there's another word for that would be easier to say. I'm not sure why you use that one. But I think it's important to know about trauma that it's 3 E words. Event, first of all, that something happens. The second thing is the experience. And the experience of that event is different for everybody and different depending on your caregivers at the time and things like that. And some of those things we can't even remember, but we have an event and then an experience, and then there's the effects, the long-term effects. That if that trauma is not addressed, if it's not cared for, if it's not, you don't resolve the question, then it gets embedded in our nervous system and it stays. We say that the body keeps the score. Bessel says the body keeps the score, and it gets stored there. And then when we say something stupid and then triggers somebody else, and then we get in an argument, and all of that comes back up, and it comes out sideways, as we say. But it's interesting to read about a couple of things. Adverse childhood experiences. It's called ACEs. And the trauma work they're doing in schools talks a lot about the adverse childhood experiences. So they have the event and the experience and then the effects. And there are also, if you look hard enough, a list of adverse religious effects or adverse religious events, AREs, that deal with religious trauma. So if you want to, I'll read the religious trauma definition. Therapist.com says religious trauma occurs when a person's religious experience is stressful, degrading, dangerous, abusive, or damaging. Traumatic religious experiences may harm or threaten to harm someone's physical, emotional, mental, I'm not going to get the page turned here, sexual, spiritual health, and safety. Just like the standard definition, it's not quite the event, but how the organization and the survivor responded to that event. And when I read those definitions, I imagine Christians sometimes jumping on that and say, see, it's just how you took it that, and really how I took it wasn't necessarily my choice. It was my environment, how much you talked about power differential a while ago, the power differentials at play, the helplessness, the lack of a caregiver or a bad caregiver, all of those things play into that adverse childhood experience or the adverse religious experience that we get from whatever event it was. And then the effects linger on into our life and can come back to haunt us. So any of that make sense?
Yeah. It's shit happens, and then we deal with the consequences.
Yeah, we deal with the consequences of shit happens. And For me, it was, I remember one of these things that I believe in somatic therapies. We could talk about that later if you want. But when I did some focusing, and in this process called focusing, what do you feel? What are you feeling? And look at that and kind of access that old trauma. I remembered an event where I had to take my little brother and sister to school when I was 7 years old. It was icy in Oklahoma, which never happened. So we were falling down and crying. And, it's all those thoughts of I shouldn't have to do this. I'm not an adult. Why am I in charge of this? And that was traumatic for me. And it came out, when I was triggered by something else in the present that brought up that trauma. And so here I am as a 7-year-old trying to resolve a current day problem. So there's a part of me that's still traumatized. Anyway, that's how I experienced, and that's what we've started dealing with and finding solutions and ways to deal with that. Religion, of course, generally encourages you just to kind of gut it out and pray for God's miracles and all of that stuff. Just keep coming to church and giving your money and volunteering your labor, and then you can spiritually bypass most of that if you want to.
Yeah, I feel like the answers are like abstractions, like, cast your cares on the Lord, pray it away, or whatever.
Yeah.
And it still doesn't deal with the human experience in any of this too. And
it oftentimes manifests, these things are ways to, using the same word, bypass actual things that we have evidence for that actually, again, as an armchair psychologist, like there are things we know that work, or at least that we have evidence that work for some people. But a lot of times that's seen as things of the world, and so it's those are seen as these kind of like secular ways of healing stuff. It's like, no, it's just you're talking to someone and dealing with the bullshit that you've gone through, because the pastor won't talk to you, or the pastor is not equipped for that. And that's fine. Not everyone's equipped to help someone work through serious trauma that they've been through in their life, but we have methods that work. We have medicines that work for certain conditions. But the church a lot of times works against that, because the church has sorry to go back to our previous topic, but a cult has to have all the answers. And if it doesn't have all the answers, then it starts to fall apart. Well, it's not perfect anymore. So it's, again, talking about the infallibility of God. Well, the organization's is fallible. So maybe God is fallible as well.
And it's hard too, because I think,
he's not real.
No, but what you'd even said too is the idea that pastors do not really get any counseling training. You may get a class or so in seminary for this, but then for them to assume that they know what someone who has a doctorate or who has gone through all of that to be able to even help someone walk through their trauma is also just ridiculous, and I feel like also leads to more harm. And I think mentioning, like you said earlier too, JD, like the cult structure of it, part of being in a cult is the idea it's us versus them. So it's, they kind of create that narrative to where, the medicine and all of this is bad. Oh, God, good. Yeah. God will fix this.
It's especially deep in America, because there's also the other strain of just anti-intellectualism in the United States as well, which I totally get. Cause I'm personally my friends always, I'm writing a paper right now with my friend, for his PhD research that's getting published in an academic journal. But it's just like, they're like, just go back and get your PhD. I'm like, I don't want to. I think like I can learn all those things on my own. So I also feel that kind of strain, and maybe it probably is because I'm American. Maybe I have some trauma against the education system, but I also get that. But I think those two things in America, especially, speaking only from this, because Taiwan, where I am right now, is the exact opposite. It's go to school as much as possible, get as many accolades and things like that as possible. But the U.S. is very different. So, but I think the us versus them. And I cut you off, Dad. So go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things that the practice I talk about the most is focusing. There's EMDR. There's lots of therapies, somatic therapies. And basically somatic therapies get you in touch with your body so that you can make a mind-body connection, hopefully kind of rewire that trauma, or integrated is the word we use a lot. But one thing that's very key, and this was taught to me by some Benedictine sisters, which I've never been Catholic, and I went to spiritual direction training when I didn't know what I was going to do with my life. And they taught me about an empathetic witness, where when you say, a part of me feels, or I feel this in my body and I feel it right here, this is what it feels like. And they would go, so it feels like this, a part of you feels like this. And I said, yeah. And blah, blah, and then I would tell them more, and I'd get a sense for what it was trying to tell me. But they didn't give me advice, rarely, almost never. They didn't interject. They didn't tell their own stories. They didn't give me a Bible verse to focus on. They're nuns, but they didn't give me what they did was they were an empathetic witness. They had empathy for me, my inner child, and my inner critic, and they just listened. And then if I would stay in touch with my body, then it's not that I would figure it out mentally. It's just that I would process being with that part of me that was wounded, and something happened. Something was different afterwards. So that the reason I said that is because what you guys said a minute ago, that empathetic witness is very hard for a pastor, for whatever reason, his own trauma, his own job description, the role we have them in, him or her, very hard for them to just sit and not give any advice and not, try to control a conversation or whatever.
Well, it takes away their power to some degree, because then they don't have all the answers. They're not, they become to some degree fallible, or they're doing something that anyone else can do. Anyone in the most technical sense has the ability to listen to someone and go, I understand, I hear you. You just echo back what they're saying. Like it doesn't take some sort of holy man to do that. So, I mean, it makes sense. And how sad is it that people can't find that in churches? You can't find a person to sit down and listen to you and just go and just shut up and just go, that's terrible. I'm sorry that happened to you. Tell me more. Explain it to me. Get it off your chest. And on top of that, especially with you guys living in the United States, what, you going to go to a psychiatrist for hundreds of dollars an hour? Like, and that's why people, and this could be another topic for another time, but that's why people turn to crystals and go down this pathway of like this new holistic magic. I almost said magic because that's what I view it as, but it's, and then you end up with people taking, horse pills and nonsense like that. And it sucks. It sucks to see, but it is the reality of what happens when you don't have real community, and you also don't fund social systems.
And it's also, I think, speaks to conditional community. The idea of being able to, for someone to listen and for you to be open, you also have to be vulnerable and not afraid of like the repercussions of you saying something. And I feel like oftentimes when we talk about people in congregations and churches, we're very guarded in what we say. That's right. We're very guarded because then it becomes gossip or becomes judgment or it becomes something else. So then it's not really a safe space anymore. Yeah. That safe space to just be able to talk and to just let things out in a place that that it won't leave the room and you're not going to be judged based upon it, which I guess that's one of the benefits of having a therapist is the fact that a lot of times they're legally bound to keep their mouth shut. Yeah. And I think that ends up creating safe spaces for people to be able to unpack their trauma.
Yeah. What happens the most is that people, Laura says is a lot, they get uncomfortable. First of all, the church doesn't have room for my grief. There's no time to do those kind of things. But then when we get someone's attention, when we talk about our problem, it makes them uncomfortable. And that's when they start throwing platitudes and Bible verses at us and advice. And let's hurry up and get this conversation over. We need to solve this. Pray to God to do a miracle or something. Let's get through it. Instead of what those sisters would do basically is groan. I mean, they would just go, and and they would in a sense kind of feel that with you. To me, that's like a deep empathy. We just need someone to feel what we're feeling, and a lot of times in our conversations, we're not very good at that.
Yeah. It reminds me of a lot of this reminds me of seeing this in high school, which is not. It shouldn't remind me of that because we're talking about a bunch of adults here. But when you have people that don't work past their issues, excuse me, that's kind of what you get. But it's the idea of a lot of the kids won't talk about their issues because they're worried about it getting spread over to other people via gossip, even with people they trust, because you get angry and then you're just like, yeah, well, this time you did this. It's like, well, I told you that in confidence. And I think obviously we could talk for 3 hours on gossip in churches. But the other thing is, not having the time and wanting to offer those quick solutions. Because even for me, I have kids that have diagnosed mental health issues, and I do spend a lot of time with them in a lot of cases, but it is hard because you can listen to them, but you want it. In some cases, you do know something. I know this can help, but that's not what they need yet. They're not to that point yet. They need to get it off their chest, and they need to be comfortable with where they're at first. Then they can move on to the next step. And it's hard not to be like, I know what you need. I know these different things you can do, different techniques you can try, but they're not there yet. So you have to have that patience. But again, to some degree, we can't expect people who are damaged goods themselves to, and I probably shouldn't use that phrase, but that have trauma themselves to be able to get other people to that point, which is why we shouldn't elevate people that haven't dealt with their bullshit.
Well, and it reminds me too of, speaking of Jewish tradition, of like the period of like Shiva, like after a death, the idea of like this 7 days of just kind of sitting in grief, and you just go and just sit with people in that. And I think that speaks to that we're in such a systematized culture where we want it to be like, oh, how do I, what is like the 3 quickest ways to deal with my trauma and move on? And it doesn't work like that. It's in there, and it just takes time, and there's moving forward, but then there's moving back with it. And it doesn't necessarily move forward the way we want it to. And I think having that ambiguity, or having that space, or having that time, we have to be able to wrestle with it. And it's not convenient.
It's back to the idea of simple solutions, but that's what I try to tell my students a lot. They're like, I don't know what to do. I'm like, that's fine. Take time with it, meditate on it, think about it, like actually think about it, and discuss it with people, discuss it with me, or discuss it with other people that you trust. But it's fine to not know. I don't know shit all the time. It's okay. It's okay. And another thing I tell them is it gets easier. If you put in the work, it gets easier to deal with that stuff, because you'll realize I'm overthinking, I'm having anxiety, I'm having depression, whatever it is. I can give myself the space and the time to go with that, to deal with that, like you're saying, with dealing with grief. But in a rapid rat race, winner takes all, capitalism, it's cutthroat, and sometimes you fall behind if you do take that time. That will make you in the long run move further. But
can I just give one more clarification?
Yes.
So sometimes we talk about talk therapists, and there's a little bit of a negativity in our tone sometimes, for the reason that talk therapy can be good, and there's some limitations. Talk therapy helps us become aware of the issue and maybe put a name or a label on it. But a lot of times we just keep revisiting that same trauma, and it's not as. The good thing is that now there are a lot more trauma-informed therapists who, aren't as much trying to put a label on something and help you understand it. That's still in your brain. That's still in your mind. It's not in your body. You have to get in your body. But there's a lot of trauma-informed therapists now. There's a lot of trauma-informed learning going on in schools. If Trump doesn't eradicate the board of education,
Hey, but we're just going to hand kids the Bible, and that'll fix all trauma.
McMahon will be great for that. There will be only Bibles and body slams, which is what we need in
We
schools.
both have, Laura and I both have a therapist, the same one actually, but it's, and like for EMDR to work, you have to kind of know what the issue is. You have to focus on, in some somatic therapies, sometimes you don't even know exactly what you're dealing with. You just know what it feels like and where you feel it. Mm-hmm. And the longer you stay with that, the more you learn about what it's trying to tell you. And it's not like, oh, well, now I know it. It's more like, oh, now I feel different. Mm-hmm. And I'm not responding the same way. So I'm a big fan of somatic therapies, if you can't tell.
And yeah, I think too, for at least me in therapy, what I've learned, it's, JD, you kind of said the idea of putting the work in. Because I think a lot of people will go into therapy with this idea that this person is going to fix me. This person is going to heal me. And and even some like therapists kind of act like that. But I think the idea that they're mainly there just to help guide you into unknitting a lot of the things or the wrong thinking or the wrong patterns that you've been through, and then hopefully give you tools to be able to start moving differently in that. But I think a lot of folks just think like, oh, I'm going to go here, I'm going to sit, and they're going to fix me. No, it's work and it sucks. But but whatever put the trauma there sucks. So
for sure. Yeah. And it's the same. It's the same. The idea was when people go to church. I just have to sit here and listen, and then I'll be redeemed, or my issues will be fixed. But it is. I mean, that's why I try to stress to the kids in my psychology classes. Look, if we're using cognitive behavioral therapy, or if we're doing image exposure therapy, whatever it is, what you do is you get taught by the teacher, which is the psychologist, and then you go home and you practice. You do homework. Mm-hmm. You have homework that you have to do, and you have to work on it constantly. And it may never get fully better, but it will get better if you follow whatever correct steps that are prescribed for you. But it's work, and that's, I think, everyone's looking for a shortcut, a quick fix. Again, I feel like we keep coming back to simple solutions, but they just don't work in most cases. So
yeah. It's good you pointed out it's a practice. Mm-hmm. Practice. That insinuates something that's ongoing, for sure.
Yeah. It is a never-ending thing. I mean, and that sounds bad, but the point is, if you are dedicated to your practice, it can get a lot easier.
I mean, because I feel like the ultimate goal, and you guys tell me where I'm wrong. I mean, I ultimately just feel like we're trying to get to a place where we're us, outside of the trauma, and that we can be more present where we are in the world. And I feel like that sounds simple, getting down to like the core of who we are and also being present. But I think those are some of the goals of being able for us to be able to experience the world as it is, and to be okay with that, and realize we're broken and messed up, but we're making it and getting better.
Yeah, I like your words, presence and authenticity, because those are two words I use a lot. But I also think one of the main goals of trauma work is to get to where we respond instead of react to triggers. Yeah. Doesn't necessarily take away triggers, but it just, gets us responding more with our thinking brain, with our cortex, than with the, all those different names you have for the root parts of your brain, the earlier formed parts of your brain. They're just reacting. Mm-hmm. They think they're in danger when it was just something somebody said to them, but it triggers something worse that happens in the past. We want to get to a point where we're responding to our world, not reacting, not just reacting to it. We need that reaction because we got to respond to a rock about to fall on our head. We can't sit there and think about it for 5 minutes. We need that part of our brain for emergencies, right? And so, but we want to make that connection between the mind and body so that we're able to respond more than just react.
Mm-hmm. One of the worst things I think too, theologically speaking, that creates so much trauma, if we're talking about church systems, is just the idea of like original sin, that we're all born into sin and we're all broken and we're all messed up, and somehow Jesus fixes it all in that. And I feel like that's so damaging just mentally, that we're already pieces of shit and we've done nothing but enter this world. And it's very damaging, and I feel like it's bad theology.
It's not only you're a piece of shit, but it's something that you spoke on earlier, is that you're also being constantly watched by this perfect entity. And so every time you fuck up, it's noted down. It's on your tally sheet to go to hell. And it's horrible. It's what drives a lot of things like anxiety and depression and things like that, I think, in the church. And it happens in other places as well. But speaking to the church, it's horrible for people. I know, thankfully, I feel like I got over it pretty quick. But I know especially when I was real young, it was just like, I don't know what to do sometimes, because I can't talk to very many people about this, because either they aren't part of the same religion as I am, or I'm worried that what we talked about earlier, that they're going to gossip about me, they're going to judge me, they're going to tell my parents, whatever. And so it's just a constant state of hyper awareness, where you're just worried about every little thing I do, and it's neurotic, to be honest. You can't. That's what does drive anxiety, is this constant, like, elevated state of awareness, and we have to be able to bring it down and just exist in our environment with our friends, with our family, things like that. And it's obviously much worse in the state we live in now, where we have to be constantly checking our phones, and we have to be because I feel this a lot as a teacher, and I tell my kids this. They're like, what do you do after you go home from school? I'm like, I go and I sit in my room, or I sit in my living room, and I just listen to music or do nothing for like 30 minutes, because all day, and it's just so draining. It's such a draining experience. And when you can't constantly live like that. You have to be able to calm down, and then, like Dad was talking about, you have to be able to, then you can get to that point where you're connecting these things and you're dealing with these things.
Make sure we talk about regulation. And on the topic you're just talking about, Mark Karras.
I've been eating lots of beans recently, so I've been quite regular, by the way.
He wrote a book called Diabolical Trinity, and it really does a good job of talking about that issue of, we came into religion traumatized already.
Yeah.
At least, a third of us have religious trauma. Then we get traumatized not only by belief, but the practices of the church, and hurt people because they're not healing. Then we bypass it and continue on. And the longer we stay in the cult, or the cult-like place, the worse it gets, and the trauma kind of builds on itself. But also, for a second, just talk about regulation. We can learn how to self-regulate. When we were 5 and our parents may not have done the right job there, or we were abandoned or neglected, we couldn't do it. But now we can, and now we know a lot of regulating therapies, like just simple breath work, like JD's talking about, just sitting. If you want to make it religious, do a thing called centering prayer. It's an old Catholic tradition, where you just sit, exactly like JD's talking about. So that's what trauma-informed educators are doing, is teaching children to regulate themselves, and then helping them do that and walking with them when they do it. That's one thing that prevents future trauma. If we can regulate long enough to think about it, basically, right?
Well, it's also, to your point earlier, it's about recognizing that we're reacting. Because I have a few students with certain conditions where, if they catch the wrong glance in the mirror or whatever it is, they see something online, it triggers them, and I'm trying to work with them, and they're working with professionals, thank God, because I'm not a professional. But I try to support them in that, and being just like, they'll now a lot of times they'll come to me and they'll go, like, I'm freaking out about this thing, and I'm like, you know what you're supposed to do? Like, just go. Let's walk up. We'll walk up and down the hall. Take some breaths. If you need to talk to me about it, you can. But it's about being able to recognize it first, because otherwise it's just spiral. You just spiral. It's so easy, and I would say I know it from experience, because you get some message. Oh, you need to do this. This is late. Oh fuck. Well, now I got to do this, but I also have to do the other thing. I have to do, and one thing for me that works with that is just sitting down and going, okay, take a couple breaths and then just write down, what do I need to do? And it ends up being not as much, but you have to have some sort of practice, to use Dad's word, that allows you to slow everything down and then not be reactive.
Yeah, it's like the farthest thing from a person that's in an anxiety spin. It's from their mind.
Yeah.
But it's what it is.
Yeah.
But you're right. That's the whole purpose of us having to to build in certain things. And what
That's
makes
why you
sense
have to
to
do
us.
the homework.
It's good. Good stuff.
I think we might have solved all the world's problems, gentlemen.
I think we did.
Yeah.
Everyone is mentally healthy now.
We've done our work.
Except for me, but
Okay. So
you'll be mental healthy in 12 hours. That's the time zone change.
I'll probably be mentally healthy in about 30 or 40 minutes when I go to bed.
Yeah. God willing.
God. I gotta go find my beads so I can pray, do a little Buddhist prayer.
All right, so we feel like we've killed this topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think we solved it.